Today we begin the story of Napoleon's life. You are not yet emperor, not yet a general, not yet a name whispered on battlefields or carved into stone. Right now, you're just a boy with the wrong accent in the wrong school, trying not to freeze your pride off in the middle of nowhere. Brienne. Cold, gray, Protestant Brienne. Where the walls feel like prison, the uniforms itch, and the boys sneer every time you open your mouth. You speak French, yes, but it curls around your teeth with that Corsican twist. You say, oui, and they hear, foreign. You say, liberty, and they hear, peasant. But that's fine, because you don't need their approval. What you need is their silence. And eventually, with time and strategy, you earn it. It begins with the dirt. Literally. You spend hours in the academy's makeshift field, not fencing like the aristocrats, but digging trenches, sketching angles, moving imaginary artillery pieces like a ghost directing a ballet of destruction. You're 13, and already you can outthink most of the instructors in siege warfare. You don't win loyalty with charm, you're not exactly huggable. You win it by outworking everyone. Even your enemies start to notice. You wake before dawn. Not because you're disciplined, but because you're anxious. Your brain doesn't shut off. You calculate pressure points while brushing your boots. You think about cannon trajectory while trying to eat lukewarm porridge. Your notebooks look more like war blueprints than school assignments. Someone calls you, the monk, behind your back because you rarely speak and always look like you're meditating on doom. They're not wrong. And then, one day, there's a fire drill. Except the smoke is real. A kitchen blaze. Panic everywhere. Students running, teachers shouting, chaos layered over chaos. You don't move. You tell two younger boys to grab buckets. You form a line. You drag a table to block the flames. And when the teacher finds you soaked in soot, hair half scorched, still shouting orders, they don't just commend you, they start to wonder if you might be something more. Here's your first weird detail. You hate snow, but you love snowstorms. Something about the clarity of crisis, maybe. The quiet chaos. You always feel calmer when the world is coming apart, like you're the only one seeing it in slow motion. This unnerves people. It also impresses them. Your instructors begin to trust you. Not socially, you're still that kid who sulks during dances and refuses to sing drinking songs. But militarily? They start handing you the reins. Simulations. Maps. They ask your opinion. You're 15. You pretend not to care, but you're already tasting what power feels like. Not loud power, the quiet kind. The kind that settles into the room like gravity. One morning, your bunkmate, older, bigger, named Henri, asks for help. Not with schoolwork, but with a plan. He wants to challenge the fencing instructor in a mock duel, just to prove a point. He thinks you can help him win. You don't roll your eyes. You sketch the timing, the stance, the footwork. You tell him how to bait the instructor's bad knee. And when Henri scores a clean touch to the chest, he nods at you from across the courtyard like you're some battlefield oracle. And maybe you are. That's the first moment you understand something deep. Loyalty doesn't start with admiration. It starts with usefulness. If you can help someone survive, they'll follow you. If you can help them win, they'll never forget your name. You leave Brienne not as a legend, but as a quiet storm everyone remembers. The strange Corsican who muttered about geometry and had eyes like distant thunder. You don't throw a party. You pack your books. You write a letter to your mother. You pretend you're not excited. But inside? Inside, you already know this is just the first step. Because while others are still figuring out who they want to be, you already know. You want to be followed. Not for ego. Not for glory. But because something inside you believes that when you're in charge, people survive. Maybe even thrive. And isn't that worth more than applause? You catch the last glimpse of Brienne's stone tower through the carriage window and almost smile. Almost. The sun is rising. The air smells like pine and gunpowder. Your shoes pinch your feet, but you don't complain. Paris is next. The big game. The real maze. You're 17, officially an officer in training, and unofficially, a walking contradiction. Quiet but intense. Poor but proud. Awkward but oddly magnetic. No one knows what to do with you. But they will. Oh, they will. Still, for now, you're just a boy who once stayed calm in a kitchen fire. Who found peace in a snowstorm. Who showed a dueling student where to place his foot and earned a nod of loyalty that would echo forward. And when you think back on Brienne, years from now, with medals on your chest and legions at your back, you won't remember the lessons or the punishments. You'll remember the dirt. The weight of a shovel in your hand. The feeling of doing something hard that no one saw, but that still mattered. Loyalty begins in the dirt. And you? You've already started digging. Paris is supposed to dazzle you, but it doesn't. You arrive expecting the heart of civilization, the pulse of genius, the city of light. Instead, you find mud. You find noise. You find officers with powdered wigs and empty eyes who measure honor by their wine collection. Welcome to the École Militaire. You're 17, which is the age when you're supposed to flirt with ideas and maybe a baker's daughter, but you don't. You spend your days reading about Caesar, Alexander, and some obscure general named Turin whose battlefield tactics make you grin like you've just heard a dirty joke. The other cadets? They're either rich, bored, or both. They arrive late, they leave early, they duel over the shape of their lapels. You eat cabbage stew and write essays about how the Roman army could have taken down modern artillery with better logistics. Nobody asks you to join the gambling tables. Nobody cares that you're Corsican. You've evolved beyond that. Now they just think you're odd. But then, one afternoon, the instructor in artillery, some crusty veteran with more fingers than friends, sees what you've sketched in the margins of your textbook. A redesign of cannon placements, using terrain like it's part of the weapon itself. He stares, then grunts something that might be praise or indigestion. Either way, you're promoted ahead of schedule. Your name slides across a desk in Versailles. You're 17 and graduating early. Because the army doesn't need charm. It needs math. You're posted to Valence, southern France, not exactly a hotspot. The food is better. The boredom, worse. Here's where things get tricky. You're technically a soldier now, but there's no war yet. Just drills, paperwork, and a lot of lying awake at night wondering if your life peaked at artillery sketches. And then something shifts. Not in you, but in France. The revolution. Suddenly, everything is trembling. Heads are falling. Kings are running. Streets become rivers of shouting, and your fellow officers either flee, resign, or go mad from ideology. But you stay calm. Again. Like the fire at Brienne. Like the snowstorms. You have that unnerving ability to breathe slow when the world spins fast. You write a political pamphlet, nothing flashy, just a calm, icy manifesto on how Corsica should integrate with revolutionary France. It's too long. Too blunt. Too smart. Nobody reads it but a librarian and a drunk captain. Still, it gets passed up the chain. Someone likes your tone. Someone likes your brain. Then comes Toulon. Toulon is a mess. The British have taken the port. The French army is flailing. Their general is terrified of his own troops, the cannons are out of place, and nobody seems to know the difference between a siege and a bread line. So they bring you in. You're 24. Skinny, pale, with eyes like gunmetal. You walk the perimeter. You don't bark orders. You mutter observations. You point. You calculate. And within a week, the entire artillery plan shifts like chess pieces on a board only you can see. And it works. The British pull out. The port is saved. A general named Degommier claps you on the back and shouts something heroic. You just nod and ask for more gunpowder. Here's your quirky detail. After the siege, you get promoted to brigadier general, and the first thing you do with your new rank is redesign the boots. Not your boots. The soldiers. You think they're too stiff, too heavy, and causing unnecessary fatigue. While everyone else is debating liberty and guillotines, you're worried about arch support. That's why they follow you. You don't just think ahead. You think sideways. You see problems where others see traditions. And you fix them. Quietly. Efficiently. With just enough sarcasm to make your aides smirk but not enough to get you thrown in jail. You start building a reputation. Not for speeches. For victories. Not for style. For precision. And then you meet them, the men. Not your commanders, not the politicians, but the ones who carry the rifles, who sleep in mud, who march without boots because the supply line failed 3 towns ago. They look at you with the wary eyes of people who've been lied to too often. You don't charm them. You walk among them. You ask what hurts. You listen when they curse. And once, famously, you sit beside one who's lost 3 toes to frostbite and say, "I think next time, we try walking in a warmer direction." They laugh. Not because it's funny, but because it's strange to be heard. That's how it starts. Loyalty in war isn't built in speeches. It's built in broken boots and shared jokes about frostbite. You're not trying to be loved. You're trying to be followed. And they do. There's something about Italy that feels like a dare. You're sent there in 1796, newly promoted to command the Army of Italy, a title that sounds grand, until you realize your troops look like unpaid theater extras. Their coats are moth-eaten. Their rifles misfire if you breathe too hard. Morale? Somewhere between miserable and mutinous. But you walk in anyway. 26 years old, barely taller than a cannon wheel, talking like the battlefield owes you rent. You don't yell. You speak fast, low, with sentences that cut like wire through fog. You promise food, glory, and new boots, maybe not in that order. And strangely, it works. You take these starving ghosts of soldiers and march them straight into the jaws of Austria's mighty empire. Lombardy, Piedmont, Milan, one by one, cities fall like dominoes in a bar fight. You're not winning through brute force. You're winning with angles, with timing, with the kind of moves chess grandmasters only dream of after 3 espressos and a minor head injury. Take Lodi. The Battle of Lodi should have been a disaster. The Austrians are dug in across a narrow bridge. A normal general would wait. Call for reinforcements. Build pontoon boats. But you look at the map, look at the bridge, and mutter, "Let's be ridiculous." So you send the grenadiers charging across under fire, while you personally direct cannon from the front lines. The Austrians break. The bridge is yours. And your men afterward stop calling you General. They start whispering, "Little Corporal." Not because of rank, but because of love. That's the moment. Not a medal. Not a parade. A nickname born from mud, fire, and sheer madness. And here's your quirky detail. After Lodi, you pause the campaign to write a letter to your wife Josephine. In it you say, "I will be home soon. Do not wash. I want to smell you." Romantic? Maybe. Confusing? Definitely. The entire courier staff refuses to comment. You push deeper into Italy. Every battle feels like a card trick. You feint left, strike right. Your soldiers start betting on which river you'll use next like it's a drinking game. They trust you. Not just with their lives, but with their boredom. You make war feel like momentum. You reorganize the supply chain, feed the army through captured towns, and negotiate ceasefires like you're hosting a dinner party. And then you do something no one expects. You start collecting art. Paintings. Sculptures. even a couple of ancient Roman busts. You ship them back to France not out of vanity, but because beauty, you think, should march beside bayonets. Some start calling you a thief. Others, a genius. You just want to keep moving. Austria keeps sending fresh troops. You keep beating them. Your army, once a joke, is now a storm. By the time you sign the Treaty of Campo Formio, Austria is gasping, and France is electrified. You've redrawn the map of Europe, and all before your 30th birthday. And you still haven't stopped writing Josephine. The men notice. You'll be inspecting a battery position, mid-siege, cannonball whizzing past, and someone will quietly slip a new letter from you into the courier bag, sealed with wax and more emotion than your officers know how to process. There's loyalty. And then there's this, the men following you into certain death while joking about your love life. They carry your picture. They quote your orders like prayers. One private carves your initials into his musket stock and refuses to clean it. When asked why, he says, "Because the mud is sacred now." You're not their general anymore. You're their gravity. So, what's next? Egypt. Because why conquer Europe when you can flirt with North Africa? The sand is a furnace, the sun a spotlight you can't turn off, and Egypt greets you not with applause, but mosquitoes, mirages, and a heat that seeps into your skeleton like it's signing a lease. Still, you smile? Because if Italy made you famous, Egypt might make you immortal. You land in 1798 with 35,000 troops, a pocket full of Enlightenment dreams, and more ambition than sunscreen. You've brought scientists, engineers, historians, like you're hosting a traveling salon in the middle of a desert war zone. Half your generals are confused. The other half are sunburned. But you walk the dunes like they're marble floors. Alexandria falls. Cairo follows. You defeat the Mamluks at the Battle of the Pyramids, not actually fought near the pyramids, but hey, branding matters. You tell your soldiers, 40 centuries look down upon you. One of them replies, I hope they brought water. Your army builds a new headquarters at the base of the Nile. You reorganize local government, set up hospitals, publish a newspaper, because even in war, someone's got to edit copy. But the dream curdles. At sea, the British arrive like a thunderclap. Admiral Nelson obliterates your fleet in the Battle of the Nile. Ships go up in flames like someone struck a match in a wine cellar. Suddenly, you're not a conqueror, you're a guest overstaying your welcome. And yet your men stay. They don't mutiny. They don't desert. They dig canals, reinforce outposts, even paint murals on walls. When dysentery spreads, they joke that Egyptian cuisine just has character. They follow you across Sinai through Syria, into Jerusalem and back. They know the campaign is crumbling, but they also know this: you're still with them, eating the same rations, sleeping on the same itchy mats. Here's your weird detail. During a battle near Acre, a stray cannonball hits the roof of your tent while you're inside writing. You pause. Stare at the hole. Then calmly say, "Tell the artillery to aim better." Your aide nods, as if this is a completely normal exchange and not the most French thing anyone has ever done. The siege of Acre breaks you a little. Disease runs rampant. Reinforcements never arrive. You stand on a bluff, staring at the sea, wondering if this is the one time momentum forgot your name. But the men still cheer when you pass. They still call you Little Corporal. Still bet on your mood like it's the weather. Even when you order a retreat, they don't curse you. They carry the wounded. They whistle the march songs. They mutter your jokes about British food just to feel warmer at night. Then you vanish. Well, not vanish. You leave in secret. Slip back to France while Egypt boils behind you. Some might call it betrayal. Others strategy. But to your men? It's something else entirely. Because when they see the ship disappear over the horizon, they don't rebel. They don't break. They hold the line. For months. For you. Who inspires that kind of loyalty? You, apparently. Back in France, the streets pulse with revolution fatigue. The government's a carousel of committees. People are tired of debates. They want lightning. And lightning walks ashore with sand still in its boots. You return to France not as a fugitive, but as a shadow rising across the landscape. The news of Egypt arrives slower than your footsteps, which means you beat the bad press by a mile. And when your boots hit Parisian stone, the people don't ask what went wrong. They ask what you'll fix next. You step into a whirlwind of government squabbling and public unrest. The directory is collapsing like a badly baked souffle, and you, tan, charismatic, and still wearing your Egyptian swagger, look suspiciously like a solution. The coup of 18 Brumaire doesn't explode with violence. It slinks through corridors and tiptoes through hallways. You orchestrate it like a symphony, a little pressure here, a forged letter there, a brother in the right place with just enough grenadiers to make senators sweat politely. And when it's done, you don't crown yourself king. Not yet. You call yourself first consul. Sounds humble. Efficient. Almost Roman. The Republic breathes easier, for now. Here's the funny thing, you're still only 30. Most men your age are figuring out how to cook pasta without setting off a fire alarm. You're rewriting constitutions between breakfast and cannon inspections. Your men return from Egypt emaciated but devoted. They bring tales of battles under the sun, of disease and mirages and glory soaked in Nile dust. They talk about how you never flinched, how you bled beside them, how you made jokes about British hats in the middle of cannon fire. You don't reward them with medals, you reward them with purpose. You streamline the army. Reorganize command structures. Introduce conscription, but couch it in patriotism so effective, they sign up humming La Marseillaise. Some complain, sure, but then they see you on horseback, in the rain, shouting orders while your uniform clings like a wet rag. If he's out here, they think, I can be too. And they are. Italy calls again. Austria thinks France is still soft. You disagree, loudly. You cross the Alps on a mule dressed up to look like a warhorse, because drama matters. The image is immortal. You pointing forward. The wind in your coat like wings. At Marengo, the Austrians tried to rewrite the script. They push hard. Too hard. For a moment, your forces wobble. Then reinforcements arrive, like an encore at the perfect moment. Victory tastes like iron and adrenaline. It's not just a win, it's a statement. France has a new center of gravity, and it rides a white horse. Here's your quirky detail. Your enemies start printing your name in bigger fonts. Not just for emphasis, for fear. Intelligence reports mention Bonaparte more than cavalry. One British officer reportedly keeps a portrait of you in his desk, not out of admiration, but as a reminder to stay vigilant. But you don't slow down. You return from Italy with more than medals. You bring home loyalty baked into the bone. Your troops chant your name in taverns. They carve it into tree trunks. In one case, a soldier names his dog, Little General, and teaches it to bark when someone says, Austria. You're not just a leader now. You're a myth in the making. And the thing about myths? They echo. You begin laying down the civil codes. Education reforms. Infrastructure programs. You establish the Bank of France. You stabilize currency. You publish newspapers that, let's say, strongly agree with your policies. Your men watch all this and nod. He's building something, they think. And we're part of it. Even the veterans who lost limbs in Egypt, who walk with canes and pinch snuff with their left hand because the right is gone, even they still show up to hear your speeches. Because when you talk about the Republic, about France, about glory, you make them feel whole again. You visit hospitals, touch the bandaged, joke with the limping. One soldier says he lost his hand. You quip, "But your heart remains. That's the part one need." He cries, not out of pain, but pride. Your army? It doesn't just march. It believes. And belief? That's something muskets can't shoot down. There's a shift in the air now, like before a thunderstorm. You can feel it in the way officers stand a little straighter when you enter the room, or how ministers begin watching their words like tightrope walkers. You're not just the first consul anymore. You are France. But the title still itches. It's temporary, uneasy, like wearing borrowed shoes that almost fit. So you give the people a choice, a referendum. Should Napoleon Bonaparte be consul for life? The people say yes, by a suspiciously overwhelming margin. Maybe the numbers were helped a little, but the applause is real. The streets echo with your name. You give them bread, stability, jobs, victories. In return, they give you loyalty. And now, longevity. You know what to do with it. The Code Napoleon begins to take shape. Not a war plan, but a civil plan. Laws that could outlive gunpowder. Rules clear and simple enough to be understood by any farmer, soldier, or baker. Property rights. Civil marriage. Religious freedom. The kind of stuff that makes lawyers smile and kings sweat. You unified the legal chaos of revolutionary France with the same discipline you brought to military campaigns. Soldiers cheer. Civilians breathe. And judges, well, judges start quoting you. And still, your men stay with you. They don't care about legislative reform, of course. What they care about is that the roads are being fixed, that pay is steady, that their families back home are safer under your rule. You show them you're not just a commander, you're the architect of a nation that actually works. You visit barracks with a laugh ready and a hand on the shoulder. You call men by name, even when they expect a number. A grenadier loses 3 fingers in training, you say. Well, now you'll hold the sword tighter with the other 2. It's dumb. But he laughs. And he stays. Then there's the Legion of Honor. A medal, yes, but more than that, a symbol. You make it look as valuable as gold and as personal as a tattoo. Even a shoemaker in the army can dream of being pinned by your hand in front of a cheering crowd. And that shoemaker? He fights twice as hard now. One of your aides brings you a letter from a dying sergeant who simply asks that his medal be buried with him. You nod. Of course. It already belongs to his bones. And now, coronation. The Pope comes to bless the moment, but you crown yourself. The silence in the cathedral is electric. This isn't arrogance. It's declaration. You are not a king because of divine right. You are an emperor by merit. Your troops explode with pride. You don't become some velvet-wrapped tyrant. You're still their general, just shinier. They know you've bled. They've seen you caked in mud, your hat blown sideways by wind, arguing with a map. Your throne doesn't erase that. Quirky detail, your imperial bees. Yes, bees. You choose them as your personal symbol, reviving an ancient French motif. They're small, tireless, organized. Like you? The soldiers start wearing bee pins. Some even tattoo them on their arms. You're not just leading an army anymore. You're building a culture. And still, the fighting isn't over. Europe isn't thrilled by your rise. Austria grumbles. Prussia twitches. Russia watches. So you do what you do best. You lead. At Austerlitz, you face 3 emperors. The fog is thick, the stakes enormous. You use the land like a chessboard. You make feints with your left, draw them in, and then crush their center with a hammer blow. The sun of Austerlitz rises through the mist, and your name becomes legend not just among the French, but whispered in foreign tongues with a strange mixture of fear and admiration. Your men, exhausted, dirty, cold, stand taller after Austerlitz. They believe even more. Because they know one thing now: when they follow you, they win. Even when they're wounded, they hobble forward. Even when they're dying, they whisper your name. You ride among them afterward, speaking softly. A dragoon with a shattered leg says, "It was worth it." And you nod, like a priest accepting confession. You don't promise long life or riches. You promise meaning. And that's all they've ever really wanted. Victory, like wine, has a strange way of dulling the senses over time. You begin to notice it in the little things, the way your generals hesitate to challenge you, how maps begin to grow messy with ambition, not caution. But still, your men follow. Because you're Napoleon, and Napoleon wins. You return to Paris after Austerlitz as the living myth. The people scream. The boulevards are flooded. And your soldiers, some hobbling on crutches, smile like children at a parade. Even amputees get pulled into the party. Everyone wants a glimpse of you, the man who broke emperors like porcelain dolls. But what no one really sees is the pressure behind your eyes. Victory breeds enemies. Too many kings are watching. Britain still snarls across the channel, too rich to bribe and too stubborn to break. So, naturally, you aim higher. You try to strangle them with trade. The continental system, a grand economic blockade. It sounds clever. Like pouring sugar into the engine of Europe. If no one can trade with Britain, you reason, she'll sink beneath her own weight. You build the idea with the same precision you once used for artillery lines. But commerce isn't a cannonball. It bends. It leaks. It bribes its way through ports in the dark. And it makes enemies faster than it makes sense. Spain turns to smoke and fire. Russia starts blinking sideways. But your men still follow. You see it most clearly in Poland. Mud, frost, terrible roads. Your boots wear thin, your horse slips on icy ruts. But the Polish soldiers, eyes full of hope, scream your name like it's salvation. They believe you'll give them a nation. That's the thing about your loyalty. It's not just French. It's contagious. You remember a young lancer who paints your silhouette on the inside of his cloak. Not for others to see, for himself. Like a lucky charm pressed against his heart. You pretend not to notice when he blushes. The army marches forward, singing in the sleet. But something changes. After years of lifting up, you begin to spread thin. Campaigns stretch across too many fronts. Austria again. Prussia again. Guerrillas in Spain harass your supply lines like mosquitoes in an outhouse. Even the jokes change. Where once men joked about your small stature, now they mutter about the size of your ambitions. Where once your temper was funny, now it makes aides avoid eye contact. But they still stay. Because every time they're ready to doubt, boom, another impossible win. Like Wagram. Like Friedland. Like lightning striking twice, then 3 times. Your soldiers start calling themselves the Immortals. You don't stop them. And when you marry Marie-Louise of Austria, they cheer. Not for love, no. For power. For stability. They don't want a sentimental emperor. They want a fertile one. And when you produce an heir, your little king of Rome, they roar with pride. One grizzled captain says, "Even our cannonballs salute." Quirky detail? You make a wooden throne for your toddler son that looks exactly like yours. Emperor Jr., complete with a rattle shaped like a scepter. It's absurd. And adorable. But mostly absurd. Through it all, your connection to the men holds. You sleep in tents beside them. You endure dysentery beside them. You eat whatever awful biscuit they're chewing, and you pretend to like it. You never hide behind a velvet curtain when the bullets fly. One morning, you wake to the sound of boots outside your tent. A young officer stands guard. When asked why he's not resting, he says simply, "Because you're not resting." And you nod. That's loyalty, simple, unspoken, and deep enough to die for. But underneath the heroics, the wear is showing. Troops don't replenish fast enough. The continental system has made boots scarce and salt expensive. And every time a drummer boy dies, it echoes longer than before. You start to hear it in your sleep. Still, you keep pushing. Because it's what they expect of you. Because it's what you expect of yourself. You think maybe, just maybe, one more war, one more campaign, and it'll all settle. The loyalty will hold. The empire will crystallize. You don't see the cracks just yet. But the ice is definitely getting thin beneath your feet. And now, Russia. You'd think that after so many campaigns, you'd have learned to be cautious around snow. But no. This time, it's going to be different. You'll move fast, hit hard, and leave before winter settles in like an uninvited guest with muddy boots. So you gather them. The Grand Army. Nearly 500,000 men from every corner of Europe. Italians, Poles, Bavarians, Prussians, Dutch, and of course, French. All under your eagle banners. They march with songs and fresh boots and dreams of glory. And why wouldn't they? You've never failed them. But Russia doesn't play by your rules. You expect battle. Instead, you get fire. Whole towns burned to cinders by their own people. Wells poisoned. Crops gone. It's like chasing a ghost across a field of ash. Every mile you gain costs you 12 horses, 100 men, and a little more hope. Still, they follow you. Even when the food is gone. Even when uniforms rot from rain and frost. Even when you cross the threshold into Moscow and find it empty, silent, smoldering, and still somehow defiant. It's not a victory. It's a trap disguised as a prize. And the real killer? Winter doesn't come in gently. It pounces. First, your horses freeze where they stand. Then the leather turns brittle. Bread becomes a luxury. Fingers blacken. Eyes glaze. And when you finally say, "Retreat," it's not really you giving an order. It's nature forcing your hand like a cruel dealer reshuffling fate. Your men don't curse you. Not yet. But they stop singing. They limp. They crawl. They whisper to themselves at night. One soldier, delirious with fever, calls out for his mother, only to be comforted by a captain who pretends to be her. You overhear it. You say nothing. It hurts too much to speak. You ride at the front silent, frost crusting your eyelashes. Your cloak flaps like torn canvas. And behind you, the Grand Army vanishes mile by mile into the snow. Loyalty doesn't scream here. It shivers. One of your aides breaks down. His brother didn't make it. You place a hand on his shoulder. There's nothing to say. No brilliant phrase or emperor's wisdom. Just shared silence. And somehow, it's enough. That's the strange thing. You think they'll abandon you. But most don't. Even with frostbitten feet. Even with friends buried in makeshift graves. Because you're still Napoleon. And what else would they follow? By the time you cross back into friendly territory, you've lost almost everything. But they carry your standards like relics from a fallen church. Torn, bloodied, holy. Back in Paris, you spin it. Strategic repositioning. Preserving the core. Words, words, words. But the truth sits heavy in your lungs. The empire starts to unravel like a cheap scarf. Prussia rises again. Austria turns on you. Spain is still a mess. Britain never stopped snarling. And Russia? Russia's just waiting for round 2. And yet, you rally. Of course you do. Because you're made of flint and fire. You raise a new army from the ground like a magician pulling bayonets from his sleeves. Younger, greener, hungrier. They don't carry the same medals, but they carry something else: belief. They weren't in Russia. They still see you as the giant. And that gives you strength. One moment stands out. Before a battle, a nervous drummer boy asks if you're afraid. You kneel beside him, touch the tip of his nose, and say, "Only of running out of clean socks." He laughs. Just a little. Just enough to beat the fear back into its cage. But behind the smiles, you see it coming. Leipzig. The Battle of Nations. It's like fighting the continent itself. Swarming armies. Cannons that sound like God's coughing. Mud thick as porridge. And too many flags that aren't yours. Still, your soldiers hold the line for days. You see a man pick up a fallen comrade's musket, even as blood seeps through his boot. You watch officers tear maps to wrap wounds. Loyalty hasn't vanished. It's just bleeding now. When it's over, the retreat is brutal. Not Russia brutal, but close. You ride through a storm of second-guessing. Is the magic gone? Have they lost faith? You pass through villages where people no longer cheer. They stare. Some spit. Back in Paris, politics fester. You're no longer a war god. They see you now as a man. And a tired one at that. You abdicate. They exile you to Elba. Tiny, rocky Elba. But here's the kicker: even then, even when you're stripped of your empire, your army, your thrones, some soldiers follow you there. They trade gold for one last moment by your side. One brings you an old campaign hat, worn thin, and says, "I saved it in case you needed reminding." You do. The embers of loyalty still burn, even on a pebble in the sea. And you? You are not done. Not yet.